The darkness between worlds held no stars. No planets spun in the endless void. Only the great black citadel floated there, its towers reaching toward nothing. This was a meeting place of death itself. Inside the massive hall, 13 figures sat around a table made of pure shadow. Each one was death from a different corner of the galaxy. Some looked like skeletons wrapped in dark robes. Others appeared as tall beings made of mist and starlight. A few took the shape of creatures with too many eyes and claws like broken glass. At the head of the table sat Mortis, the oldest of them all. His face was hidden beneath a hood that seemed to swallow light. When he spoke, his voice echoed like wind through empty tombs. "We have a problem," Mortis said. His bony fingers tapped against the shadow table. "A human problem." The other Reapers shifted in their seats. Thanatos, who looked like a woman made of silver smoke, leaned forward. "You mean the one who keeps escaping us?" "Captain Kim Taeho," Mortis replied. The name hung in the air like a curse. 17 times in 1 year. 17 times we have come for him. 17 times he has slipped through our fingers. Necros, a creature with burning red eyes, slammed his fist on the table. "It should be impossible. No mortal can cheat death so many times, but he does. More than just survive," said Atropos, whose voice sounded like breaking glass. "He laughs. Every single time, he laughs." The Reapers fell silent. In all their long existence, spanning millions of years and countless worlds, they had never encountered anything like this. Fear, they understood. Anger, they expected. Desperation was common, but laughter in the face of certain death was something new. Mortis waved his hand. The air above the table shimmered and showed moving pictures like a window into the past. The Reapers watched as events unfolded before them. The first image showed a small human fighter ship spinning out of control toward a dying star. The ship was on fire, its engines dead, its hull cracking from the heat. Inside the cockpit sat a man, with short black hair and bright eyes. This was Kim Taeho. As his ship fell toward the nuclear flames, he should have been screaming. Instead, he was grinning. "Well, this is new." His voice came through the speakers. "I always wondered what it would be like to surf a solar flare." The Reapers watched as Taeho did something impossible. He used the dying star's own energy to restart his engines. He rode the massive explosion like a wave, somehow finding a path through the chaos that launched him to safety. As his battered ship limped away from the supernova, they could hear him laughing over the radio. "That was better than any roller coaster," he said to his rescue team, "though I would not recommend it for a first date." The image changed. Now they saw Taeho's ship, the Defiant Dawn, caught in the pull of a black hole. The massive gravity, was tearing the vessel apart piece by piece. Any normal captain would have accepted death. Any normal crew would have panicked. But Taeho stood on his bridge, calm as still water. "Attention crew," his voice echoed through the ship. "We are about to do something that will either make us legends or make us very flat. Possibly both." He ordered his crew to dump all their cargo directly into the black hole. The sudden loss of mass changed their trajectory just enough. They slingshot around the event horizon at impossible speed, escaping into normal space. As they flew away, Taeho's laughter filled the bridge. "I think we just broke several laws of physics," he announced cheerfully. "I hope the universe does not send us a ticket." More images followed. Taeho's ship surrounded by enemy vessels, outnumbered 50 to 1. Instead of surrendering, he flew straight at the largest enemy ship, ramming it while his crew evacuated in escape pods. The explosion took out half the enemy fleet. Another scene showed him walking through a space station as it exploded around him. He should have been running for his life. Instead, he was helping other people escape, cracking jokes to keep their spirits up as the world fell apart. "The good news," he told a terrified child as he carried her to safety, "is that we are getting the most expensive fireworks show in the galaxy for free." Each time death came for him, Taeho found a way to turn disaster into victory. Each time he faced impossible odds, he responded with humor and hope. The Reapers had never seen anything like it. Thanatos spoke first when the images faded. "How does he do it? What makes this human so different?" "It is not just him," said Erebus, a Reaper who rarely spoke. "Watch his crew. Watch how they act when he is near." Mortis showed them more scenes. Taeho's crew fighting with impossible courage. His soldiers charging into battle with smiles on their faces. His engineers fixing broken ships while humming happy songs. His doctors treating the wounded while telling jokes. "He makes them brave," Atropos observed. "His laughter is like a disease that spreads to everyone around him." "But how?" Necros demanded. "Fear is natural. Death is final. These are laws of existence. No mortal should be able to ignore them." "Perhaps," Mortis said slowly, "we need to learn his secret. We have tried to take him 17 times using the old methods. Each time he defeats us not with weapons or technology, but with something we do not understand." The council chamber fell quiet. The idea was almost unthinkable. The Reapers were teachers of fear, bringers of endings. They did not learn from mortals. They harvested them. "You suggest we study him?" Thanatos asked. I suggest we infiltrate his world, Mortis replied. We take mortal forms. We walk among his kind. We learn how they think, how they live, how they can laugh when they should be crying. And then, Erebus asked, then we face him again, armed with knowledge instead of just power. Mortis leaned back in his shadow throne. If we can understand what makes humans so resilient, we can finally claim what is ours. The other Reapers considered this. It was dangerous. Taking mortal form meant accepting mortal limitations. It meant experiencing life from the inside instead of simply ending it. But they had tried everything else. I will go, Thanatos volunteered. I have always been curious about mortal emotions. As will I, said Necros. If this human can turn fear into laughter, I must see how. Mortis nodded. Then it is decided. 3 of us will walk among the humans. We will learn their ways. We will discover the source of their impossible hope. He stood from his throne, his dark robes flowing like liquid night. Kim Taeho has taught death to be patient. Now death will teach itself to be human. When next we meet him, we will understand his power. The council began to dissolve as the Reapers prepared for their mission. Soon, the great citadel was empty, except for Mortis. He stared into the void beyond the windows, thinking about laughter. In the face of doom, for the first time in his eternal existence, Death was curious about life. 3 days later, the human medical station at Kepler Station received new crew assignments. Dr. Park Jae-sung arrived first, carrying papers that said he was a trauma surgeon from Earth. He looked normal enough, middle-aged, with kind eyes and steady hands. No one suspected that inside this human shell lived Mortis. Oldest of all, the REAPERS. Engineer Lee Bjoram came next. Her transfer papers showing years of experience with fusion drives and life support systems. She smiled politely at her new coworkers and asked good questions about the station layout. None of them could sense that Thanatos' death in female form was studying every human interaction with ancient eyes. The last to arrive was Pilot Han, Min-soo, young and eager, with the quick reflexes that marked all good fighter pilots. His records showed excellent scores from the academy. They did not show that Necros, the Reaper of Violent Ends, was wearing his face like a mask. All 3 had come to study Captain Kim Tae-ho. Their target was due to dock at the station in 6 hours for medical treatment and ship repairs. The Defiant Dawn had been badly damaged in their latest impossible escape from an alien death fleet. Dr. Park stood in the medical bay, reviewing patient files on his tablet. Everything felt strange in this mortal body. He could feel his heart beating, could sense air moving in and out of his lungs. Mortis had existed for millions of years without breathing. Now every breath was a conscious effort. Dr. Park, a young nurse, approached him. The trauma cases from the Defiant Dawn will be here soon. Captain Taeho requested that we prepare for 12 wounded, 3 critical. Mortis nodded, trying to look professional. What happened to them? They flew through an asteroid field while being chased by enemy ships, the nurse explained. The captain used the rocks as cover, but several asteroids hit the hull. The crew kept fighting even while their ship was falling apart around them. Were they afraid? Mortis asked. It seemed like a natural question for a doctor. The nurse laughed. Afraid? These are Taeho's people. They were probably making jokes about getting free rock samples while dodging death rays. Before Mortis could ask what she meant, alarms began ringing throughout the station. The Defiant Dawn was requesting emergency docking. Engineer Lee was in the docking bay when the ship arrived. The vessel looked like it had been through a war. Huge holes were punched through the hull. One engine was completely gone. Sparks flew from broken electrical systems. Any normal ship would have broken apart hours ago. But as the docking clamps engaged, Lee could hear something impossible coming from inside the ship. Laughter, loud, cheerful, human laughter echoing through the corridors. The airlock opened, and Captain Kim Taeho stepped out. He was a man of average height, with short black hair and bright, intelligent eyes. His uniform was torn and dirty, and he had a bandage around his left arm. But he was grinning like he had just won a prize instead of barely surviving certain death. Welcome to Kepler Station, Captain, the docking officer said. That was some flying out there. Thank you, Taeho replied, his voice warm with humor, though I think my ship disagrees. She is giving me the silent treatment now. He patted the damaged hull affectionately. Do not worry, old girl. We will fix you up good as new. Behind him came his crew. They were wounded, exhausted, and covered in soot from the battle. But they were all smiling. Some were even chuckling as they helped carry their more seriously injured teammates. Lee watched in fascination as medics rushed forward with stretchers. In all her eternal existence as Thanatos, she had seen countless battles. Warriors usually came back from near-death experiences, shaken, traumatized, grateful to be alive. These humans acted like they had just finished playing some exciting game. How bad are the injuries? Dr. Park asked as the medical team brought in the wounded. Nothing we have not seen before, Taeho answered cheerfully. Commander, you took some shrapnel in the leg, but she kept flying her fighter with one foot. Said it gave her ship character. Lieutenant Nam got knocked unconscious when a console exploded. but he woke up asking if anyone got the license number of that asteroid. As they spoke, the wounded crew members were joking with the medical staff. One soldier with a broken arm was telling the nurses about how he had continued firing the ship's guns with his good hand. I thought it was like playing a really expensive video game, he laughed, except the graphics were way too realistic. Dr. Park began treating the most serious cases. As Mortis, he had watched countless beings face injury and death. Most were terrified, begging for more time, desperate to avoid their fate. These humans were different. They thanked him for his help, asked about his day, and worried more about their teammates than themselves. "Doctor," one wounded pilot asked, as Park cleaned a deep cut on her forehead, "is everyone else okay? I saw Lieutenant Cho take a hit to his fighter." "He is fine," Park replied. "Just some burns on his hands." "Good," she sighed with relief. "We stick together, you know. That is what makes us strong." Meanwhile, Pilot Han was in the fighter bay, examining Taeho's personal ship. The small craft was even more damaged than the main vessel. Its wings were bent, its hull was cracked, and one landing gear was completely missing. By all rights, it should never have made it back to the station. "She is a tough old bird," said a voice behind him. Han turned to see Captain Taeho approaching. "Not pretty to look at anymore, but she got us home." "How did you keep her flying?" Han asked, as Necrosy was genuinely curious. He had seen many warriors die in damaged vehicles. Most lost control and crashed within minutes. Taeho patted the ship's nose fondly. "The secret is not to let her know how badly hurt she is. Ships are like people. If they think they cannot do something, they usually cannot. But if you believe in them, they will surprise you." He began pointing out various systems, explaining how his crew had bypassed damaged circuits and rerouted power to keep essential functions working. Engineer Kim suggested we use the cooling system to boost the shields. It was crazy enough that it actually worked. We managed to ram 3 enemy fighters while our own ship was held together, mostly by hope and determination. "Were you not afraid of dying?" Han asked. Taeho considered the question seriously. "Fear is natural," he said finally, "but I learned long ago that being afraid and being brave are not opposites. You can be scared and still do what needs to be done. The trick is not to let fear make your decisions for you, so you just ignore it." "No," Taeho shook his head. "I acknowledge it, thank it for trying to keep me safe, and then I choose something more important to focus on. Usually, my crew, or the mission, or sometimes just the absurdity of whatever impossible situation we have gotten ourselves into." He gestured toward his battered ship. "Look at this bucket of bolts. By every law of physics and engineering, we should be dead right now. But we are not. We are here, talking, breathing, planning our next adventure. If that is not worth laughing about, what is?" As the day continued, the 3 Reapers observed more of the same pattern. Humans facing danger with humor. Crews working together with absolute trust. Individuals choosing hope over despair, even when logic suggested otherwise. In the mess hall that evening, Captain Taeho sat with his crew, telling stories about their escape. He made their desperate flight sound like a grand adventure, highlighting moments of cleverness and courage rather than dwelling on how close they had come to death. And then, he was saying to a group of laughing listeners, "Lieutenant Park suggests we hide behind the smallest asteroid in the field. I told him that was like hiding behind a pebble while giants throw rocks at you. But you know what? It worked because they were not expecting anyone to be that crazy." The 3 Reapers watched from different parts of the room. They had come expecting to find either a madman or a fool. Instead, they had discovered something much more complex. Kim Taeho was neither crazy nor stupid. He was something they had never encountered before. A human who had learned to find joy in the struggle itself. As the evening wound down and the crew began heading to their quarters, Dr. Park approached Captain Taeho. "May I ask you something? Personal, of course. Doctor, why do you laugh so much? Even when facing certain death?" Taeho smiled, and for a moment, Mortis saw something in the human's eyes that he had never seen before. A depth of understanding that came not from avoiding suffering, but from finding meaning within it. "Because laughter is the most human thing we can do," Taeho replied. "It says that no matter how dark things get, no matter how impossible the odds, we still choose to find light. We still choose to hope. And that choice, Doctor, is what makes us stronger than anything the universe can throw at us." That night, as the 3 Reapers lay in their assigned quarters, each struggling with the strange sensation of needing sleep, they began to understand why Kim Taeho was so hard to kill. He had weaponized hope itself. 2 weeks passed on Kepler Station. The 3 Reapers continued their disguises, learning more about human nature with each passing day. What they discovered challenged everything they thought they knew about mortal life. Dr. Park was working in the medical bay when the emergency alarms began blaring. Red lights flashed through the corridors as the station's automated voice announced the crisis. "Attention all personnel. Life support failure in Section 7. All non-essential crew evacuate immediately." Section 7 was where Captain Taeho and his crew were staying while their ship was being repaired. Park rushed toward the emergency, expecting to find panic and chaos. Instead, he found something completely different. Through the observation window, he could see into the sealed section. The air was growing thin, and the temperature was dropping fast. Most beings would be screaming, fighting each other for the remaining oxygen, or breaking down in terror. But Tahoe's crew was sitting in a circle on the floor, breathing slowly and calmly. "What are they doing?" Park asked the emergency coordinator. "The captain called it a meditation contest," the coordinator replied, shaking his head in amazement. He told his crew that whoever could stay calm longest would win extra shore leave. They have been like this for 20 minutes. Park watched as Tahoe moved around the circle, checking on each crew member. He was not meditating himself. Instead, he was telling quiet jokes and stories, keeping everyone's spirits up while they waited for rescue. Lieutenant Kim Tae was saying to a young woman who looked scared, "Remember that time you held your breath for 3 minutes to fix the underwater sensor? This is just like that, except we are not underwater and there are no angry fish." The woman managed a small smile. Her breathing slowed down, becoming more controlled, and Sergeant Lim Tahoe continued, "You grew up in the mountains where the air is thin, right? This is just like home, except with better company." The sergeant chuckled softly. "Yes, sir, though my grandmother's house had better heating." Park realized what Tahoe was doing. He was not just keeping his crew calm, he was teaching them that fear used up oxygen faster than anything else. By keeping them relaxed and focused, he was making their limited air supply last longer. "How much time do we have?" Park asked the coordinator. "Maybe 30 minutes before the air runs out completely." "And how long until repairs are finished?" "At least 45 minutes. Park felt something strange in his chest. Worry. As Mortis, he had never experienced concern for mortal life before, but watching these humans face death with such dignity and trust, and their captain made him want to help them survive. He grabbed his medical kit and headed for the emergency airlock. "I am going in there." "Doctor, that is against regulations. You could die too." "Then I will die helping them," Park replied, surprising himself with the words. Besides, someone needs to monitor their vital signs. Inside the failing section, Park found the crew exactly as he had seen them through the window. They were sitting in a circle, breathing slowly and evenly. Some had their eyes closed. Others were looking at their captain with complete trust. Tahoe looked up as Park entered. "Dr. Park, I hope you did not come in here to tell us our situation is hopeless. We are having such a pleasant meditation session. How are you all so calm?" Park asked. "Practice," Tahoe replied with a smile. "You learn to stay calm in space, or space teaches you very quickly why you should have learned. Fear makes you breathe faster, use more oxygen, make bad decisions. Calm thinking is what keeps you alive." As Park checked the crew's vital signs, he listened to Tahoe continue his quiet commentary. The captain was not just keeping his people calm, he was teaching them about their own strength. "Chief Nam," Tahoe said to an older man with gray hair, "tell us about the time you fixed the engine while we were being shot at." Nam smiled without opening his eyes. The trick was to ignore the explosions and focus on the work. Engines do not care if you are scared. They only care if you know what you are doing. "Exactly," Tahoe agreed. "And right now, our job is to breathe slowly and wait for rescue. The air does not care if we are worried about it. It only cares that we use it wisely." 20 minutes later, the repairs were complete and fresh air began flowing into the section. As the crew stood up and stretched, Park marveled at what he had witnessed. Not one person had panicked. Not one had demanded to be saved first. They had faced death as a team, supporting each other through their darkest hour. "How did you know they would stay calm?" Park asked Tahoe privately. "Because I taught them that they could," Tahoe replied. "Humans are capable of incredible things when they believe in themselves and trust their leaders. The secret is to give them something to focus on besides their fear." Meanwhile, Engineer Lee was working in the ship repair bay with Chief Engineer Nam. The Defiant Dawn was slowly being rebuilt, piece by piece. As they worked, Nam told Lee stories about human history. "My grandfather used to tell me about the old days on Earth," Nam said as they installed a new power coupling. "Before we had space travel, before we had all this technology, humans lived through ice ages, plagues, wars that lasted decades. You know how they survived." Lee shook her head. As Thanatos, she knew about human wars and disasters, but only from the perspective of those who died. She had never considered how the survivors managed to keep going. "They told stories," Nam continued. "Around fires, in caves, in bomb shelters, they made jokes even when they were starving. They sang songs even when their cities were burning. My grandfather said that laughter was the one thing that kept humans human when everything else was falling apart." "But why laugh when things are terrible?" Lee asked. Nam paused in his work and looked at her seriously. "Because if you do not laugh, you cry. And if you cry too much, you give up. And if you give up, you die. So we laugh instead. We find something funny in the worst situations because it reminds us that we are still alive, still thinking, still hoping for better days." He returned to his work, humming a cheerful tune. Captain Tejo understands this better than most. He does not laugh because he is crazy or because he does not understand danger. He laughs because he knows that hope is more powerful than fear. Lee found herself thinking about this as she worked. In all her eternal existence, she had seen mortals face death with many different emotions, but she had never considered that some emotions might be chosen rather than felt, that a being could decide to be hopeful instead of afraid. Nam, she said carefully, what if hope is not enough? What if the danger is too great? Nam smiled, then you hope anyway. You hope because giving up helps no one. You hope because your hope might inspire someone else to keep trying. You hope because the alternative is to accept defeat before the fight is even over. He gestured toward the damaged ship around them. Look at this old bucket. By all rights, she should be scrap metal, but we are fixing her because we hope she will fly again. We believe she will carry us to new adventures, new victories, new impossible escapes from certain doom. And if she breaks down again, then we will fix her again. Or we will find another ship, or we will build one from spare parts and determination. That is what humans do. We keep trying until we succeed, or until trying becomes impossible. And sometimes we try even then. Across the station, Pilot Han was flying patrol missions with Commander Yu. As they cruised through the asteroid belt surrounding Kepler Station, Han listened to the radio chatter between the human pilots. Red Leader, this is Red 3. I have contacts on long-range sensors. Looks like a scouting party of enemy fighters. Copy that, Red 3. How many? 12 ships. Sir, they have us outnumbered 3-1. Han expected to hear concern or fear in the pilot's voice. Instead, he heard something like excitement. Well, came Red Leader's reply, at least it will not be boring. All wings, form up for intercept. Let us go remind these visitors that humans do not like uninvited guests. As the squadron moved to engage the enemy, Han listened to the pilots joke and encourage each other over the radio. Red 5, your ship is looking a little dusty. Try not to let the enemy fighters clean it off with laser fire. Copy that. Red Leader, I will ask them politely to use soap and water instead. Red 2, stay close to Red 4. He gets lonely when he flies by himself. Roger, though I should warn you, Red 4, I am not a very good conversationalist during combat. I mostly just scream and curse. Han realized that the humans were not being careless or stupid. They were using humor to stay relaxed and focused. Fear made pilots tense, caused them to make mistakes, reduced their reaction time. By keeping the mood light, they were actually making themselves more effective in combat. The battle was swift and decisive. The human pilots worked together like they had been flying as a team for years. They covered each other, shared targeting information, and coordinated their attacks with perfect timing. The enemy scouts were either destroyed or driven off within minutes. Nice work, everyone, Red Leader announced as they regrouped. Red 3, excellent job on those sensor readings. Red 4, that was some fancy flying when you took out 2 fighters with 1 shot. Thanks, boss. Though I should mention that, I was actually aiming for the first one. The second one just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The trap was perfect. Captain Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge of his newly repaired ship, watching 12 massive enemy vessels surround the Defiant Dawn. The Harvester-class destroyers had been waiting in the nebula for 3 days, hidden until the human ship was too far from the station to call for help. Well, Tae-ho said, looking at the tactical display, this is interesting. 12-1 odds. He turned to his bridge crew with a smile. They either think we are very dangerous, or they are very bad at math. His crew chuckled despite their fear. Lieutenant Oh Soo-jin, his navigator, shook her head with amusement. Captain, I think they might have done the math correctly this time. Nonsense, Tae-ho replied cheerfully. 12 ships means 12 different captains trying to coordinate an attack. That is 12 different egos, 12 different plans, and at least 12 different ways for them to get in each other's way. In the medical bay, Dr. Park felt his stolen heart racing as he watched the enemy ships close in. As Mortis, he had been present for countless last moments. This should have been familiar territory, but experiencing it from inside a mortal body, surrounded by humans who faced certain death with humor instead of terror, was completely different. Doctor, Nurse Chen approached him. Should we prepare the emergency medical pods? For what? Park asked. In case anyone survives. She replied, matter. Captain Tae-ho has a habit of keeping people alive in situations where they should definitely be dead. Park stared at her. You really believe he can get us out of this? Dr. Chen smiled. 3 months ago, the captain flew us through the inside of a gas giant to escape enemy ships. Last month he used a solar flare as a weapon. If anyone can figure out how to beat 12-1 odds, it is him. On the bridge, Communications Officer Lee Bjorm listened as the enemy fleet sent their surrender demands. The lead harvester captain's voice was cold and mechanical. Human vessel, you are completely surrounded. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Tae-ho picked up the communication device and replied in his most polite voice. Thank you for the generous offer, but we will have to decline. We have dinner reservations back at the station, and we would hate to be late. The enemy captain sounded confused. Human, you do not understand. You cannot escape. Accept your fate. Oh, I understand perfectly. Tejo replied cheerfully. 12 big ships, 1 small ship, no way out. The math is very clear. But here is the thing about math. Sometimes the most interesting solutions come from changing the equation. As Thanatos Lee had watched countless beings face overwhelming odds, most either raged against their fate or accepted it with despair. But Tejo was treating this like a puzzle to be solved rather than a death sentence to be feared. All stations, this is your captain speaking, Tejo announced over the ship's intercom. Today we find ourselves in what the military manuals would call an impossible situation. Fortunately, we never were very good at following manuals. Laughter echoed through the ship's corridors. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Nam was already running diagnostics on every system. Captain, he reported, engines are at full power, shields are charged, and the coffee machine is still working. We are ready for whatever impossible plan you have this time. Excellent, Chief. How long can our reactor run at maximum overload without exploding? About 15 minutes, sir. Maybe 20 if we are very lucky. Perfect. More than enough time. In the fighter bay, Pilot Han watched Commander Yu prepare her fighter squadron for launch. As Necros, he had witnessed many warriors preparing for their final battle. But these humans showed no signs of the desperate fury or resignation he expected. Listen up, people. Commander, you addressed her pilots. The captain is about to do something that will either make us legends or make us very dead. Possibly both. Our job is to make sure we survive long enough to find out which. What is the plan, Commander? Asked Lieutenant Park. I have no idea, Yu admitted with a grin. But it will definitely be crazy, probably impossible, and absolutely worth telling stories about afterward. The pilots laughed and began their final equipment checks. Han realized they were not just following orders, they were participating in something they genuinely believed could work. No matter how impossible it seemed. On the bridge, Tejo was studying the enemy formation with intense concentration. His officers watched him think, waiting for his next move. Finally, he looked up with the biggest smile any of them had ever seen. I have an idea, he announced. It is completely insane, probably illegal in most solar systems, and will require perfect timing from everyone. So, a normal Tuesday then, Lieutenant O observed. Exactly. Here is what we are going to do. We are going to surrender. The bridge fell silent. Several officers looked confused. Sir, O asked carefully. We are going to broadcast a surrender signal and prepare to be boarded, Tejo explained. They will want to capture the ship intact, so they will move in close. Very close. Understanding began to dawn on his crew's faces. While they are surrounding us, Tejo continued, we will launch all our escape pods as decoys. The enemy will think we are abandoning ship in panic. They will focus on capturing the pods and securing the ship. And then? Asked Tactical Officer Kim. And then we turn our reactor into the biggest bomb this side of a supernova, Tejo said cheerfully. We fly straight into the middle of their formation and give them a very warm goodbye. Engineer Lee felt something she had never experienced before: admiration. As Thanatos, she had seen countless acts of sacrifice and courage. But this was different. Tejo was not just willing to die for his crew. He was turning his own death into a weapon to save them. Sir, Communications Officer Park reported, they are accepting our surrender. Moving to boarding positions. Perfect. All departments execute evacuation protocol. Make it look convincing. Lots of panic, running around, and general chaos. But remember, this is a performance. We are actors putting on a show. Throughout the ship, the crew began their carefully choreographed panic. They ran through corridors carrying bags and equipment, shouting about the ship's systems failing, and the reactor going critical. To outside observers, it looked like a crew, in complete terror, abandoning their vessel. But Dr. Park, watching from the medical bay, could see the truth. Every panicked crew member knew exactly where they were going and what they were doing. They were not fleeing in terror, they were executing the most complex and dangerous plan any of them had ever attempted. Launch all escape pods, Tejo ordered. Random trajectories, maximum dispersal pattern. The pods shot out from the defiant dawn like seeds from a flower, scattering in all directions. The enemy ships immediately began pursuing them. Exactly, as Tejo had predicted, reactor overload in 10 minutes and counting, Chief Nam reported. All non-essential crew are clear. Excellent. Skeleton crew to bridge for final phase. Only 12 people remained on the ship. Tejo, his senior officers, and the 3 disguised reapers who had chosen to stay and witness the end. They watched as the enemy vessels closed in, their captains confident they had finally captured the infamous human who had escaped death so many times. You know, Tejo said conversationally as they approached the enemy formation, I just realized something. What is that, sir? Lieutenant O asked. Today really is a good day to die, he replied with genuine happiness. which is exactly why we are not going to at the last possible second, as the reactor reached critical overload and the enemy ships realized too late what was happening. Tahoe gave his final order, all remaining crew to emergency escape capsule. It has been an honor serving with you all. The three Reapers found themselves crammed into the tiny emergency capsule with Tahoe and his officers as the defiant dawn exploded in a burst of light that could be seen from 3-star systems away. The blast took out 8 of the 12 enemy ships and severely damaged the others. As they floated in space waiting for rescue, Dr. Park turned to Captain Tahoe. How did you know that timing would work perfectly? Tahoe smiled. I did not, but I knew my crew would make it work. That is what humans do. We take impossible situations and make them possible through skill, teamwork, and a healthy disrespect for the laws of probability. He looked out at the debris field that had once been his ship and 12 enemy vessels. Besides, someone once told me that the universe has a sense of humor. Sometimes the best way to survive is to tell a better joke than death itself. The three Reapers stared at him in amazement. Kim Tahoe had just destroyed his own ship, defeated overwhelming odds, and saved his entire crew. And he was treating it like it had been a particularly entertaining day at work. For the first time in their eternal existence, death had learned something from life, and they were beginning to understand why this human was so very hard to kill. The rescue ship found them 3 hours later, floating in their emergency capsule among the wreckage of 13 nurse ships. Captain Kim Tahoe was using the time to tell jokes and stories to keep everyone's spirits up, even though they were crammed into a space meant for 6 people, not 12. And that, he was saying as the rescue ship docked with their capsule, is why you should never trust a navigation computer that speaks with a cheerful voice. Happy machines are usually planning something terrible. As they transferred to the rescue vessel, the three Reapers made their decision. They had learned enough. It was time to reveal themselves and get the answers they needed. Dr. Park, Engineer Lee, and Pilot Han waited until Captain Tahoe was alone in the rescue ship's observation lounge. He was standing by the large window, looking out at the debris field where his ship had died, saving them all. Remarkable, he said, without turning around. 12 enemy ships, and we managed to take out most of them with a single vessel. My crew really outdid themselves this time. Captain, Dr. Park said quietly, we need to talk. Tahoe turned around, and his expression shifted slightly. For the first time since they had met him, he looked serious. I was wondering when you three would reveal yourselves. I have been waiting for this conversation. The three Reapers stared at him in shock. You knew? Engineer Lee asked. Not at first, Tahoe admitted, but I have been dancing with death for so long that I learned to recognize the steps. Dr. Park, you never blink when treating severe injuries. Engineer Lee, you understand alien technology better than any human should. And Pilot Han, you fly like someone who has seen 1,000 different species fight and die. He sat down in one of the lounge chairs and gestured for them to do the same. Plus, there was the small matter of 3 new crew members arriving just before I showed up at the station. Death has always had a sense of dramatic timing. The Reapers slowly took their mortal forms off like removing uncomfortable masks. Dr. Park became Mortis, ancient and terrible, his face hidden in shadows that seemed to swallow light. Engineer Lee transformed into Thanatos, beautiful and deadly, made of silver mist and starlight. Pilot Han revealed himself as Necros, with burning red eyes and claws like broken glass. Captain Tahoe looked at them without fear, without surprise, and without anger. Instead, he smiled, that same warm, genuine smile they had seen him give to his crew, his patients, and his friends. Hello, Death, he said politely. I have been expecting you. Mortis leaned forward. You show no fear. Why should I be afraid? Tahoe asked. Dev and I are old friends. By now, we have had 17 appointments, and I have been late to every one. I was starting to think you might be offended. How Thanatos demanded, how can you remain so calm? We are the end of all things, the final darkness, the inevitable conclusion to every story. Tahoe considered this seriously, because I died a long time ago. The three Reapers fell silent. I do not mean physically, Tahoe continued. I mean the person I used to be. Kim Tahoe, the individual, who worried about his own survival, his own comfort, his own future. That person died the day I decided to fight for something bigger than myself. He stood up and walked back to the window, looking out at the stars. The moment I chose to protect others instead of just surviving, the moment I decided that my crew's lives were more important than my own, that version of me stopped existing. What you see now is something different. What are you then? Necros asked. I am Kim Tahoe, the idea, he replied. I am the belief that humans can overcome any obstacle if they work together. I am the hope that laughter can triumph over despair, that courage can defeat overwhelming odds, that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose to care about something beyond themselves. He turned back to face them. You cannot kill an idea with weapons, or explosions, or even death itself. Ideas live on in the people they inspire, the stories they create, the hope they spread to others. Thanatos shook her head. But you are still mortal. You still have a physical body that can be destroyed. Of course, Tejo agreed. This body will die someday. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in 50 years, but the idea will continue. My crew will remember that they survived impossible odds. They will tell stories about the captain who taught them to laugh at death. Those stories will inspire others to be brave, to find hope in dark times, to never give up no matter how bad things look. He sat back down and looked at each Reaper in turn. That is why you have had so much trouble collecting me. You keep trying to kill Kim Tejo, the person, but that person already chose to die for others. What remains is much harder to destroy. The laughter, Mortis said slowly, that is your weapon. Not a weapon, Tejo corrected, a choice. Every time I face certain death, I have a decision to make. I can be afraid, which will make me think poorly and act desperately. I can be angry, which will make me reckless and endanger my crew, or I can find something to laugh about. But why laughter specifically? Necros asked. Tejo grinned. Because existence is absurd. Think about it, we are tiny specks of matter, floating through an infinite universe that does not care if we live or die. We are born without choosing it, we struggle through life without understanding it, and we die without wanting to. The whole situation is completely ridiculous. He gestured toward the debris field outside. Look at what just happened. 12 giant warships, built by an advanced alien civilization, defeated by one small human vessel held together mostly by determination and spare parts. If that is not worth laughing about, what is? So you laugh because life is meaningless? Thanatos asked. No, Tejo shook his head firmly. I laugh because life is so meaningful that taking it too seriously would drive me insane. We matter so much, our choices have such incredible consequences, that the only sane response is to find joy in the struggle itself. He leaned forward, his eyes bright with passion. When you take yourself too seriously, you forget that every moment, even the terrifying ones, is a gift. You forget that consciousness itself is miraculous. That the fact we can think and feel and choose is the most amazing thing in the universe. But the pain, Mortis said, the suffering, the loss, how can you laugh when surrounded by so much darkness? Because that is exactly when laughter is most important, Tejo replied. Anyone can be happy when things are going well, but choosing joy when everything is falling apart, finding reasons to hope when hope seems impossible, caring about others when the world gives you every excuse to be selfish. That is what makes us human. He stood up again and walked to the window. Every time one of my crew members dies, it breaks my heart. Every time we face impossible odds, part of me is terrified. Every time I see injustice and suffering, I want to rage against the unfairness of it all. Then, how do you keep going? Necros asked. Because giving in to despair helps no one, Tejo said simply. My crew needs a captain who believes they can succeed. The people we protect need defenders who will not give up. The universe needs someone to prove that hope is stronger than fear, that love is more powerful than hate, that laughter can echo longer than screams. He turned back to the three Reapers. That is why you have been unable to claim me. You represent the end of hope, the final victory of despair over joy. But I represent the opposite, the refusal to surrender, the choice to keep fighting, the decision to find meaning in the struggle itself. Thanatos felt something strange happening inside her borrowed form. For millions of years, she had brought endings to countless beings. She had been present at the final moments of stars, planets, and civilizations. But she had never understood what Tejo was describing, the idea that choosing how to face death was more important than avoiding it. You are saying that dying with courage is better than living with fear, she asked. I am saying that how you live is more important than how long you live, Tejo replied. A coward who lives for 1,000 years and helps no one is worth less than a hero who dies young, saving others. Quality matters more than quantity. Mortis found himself thinking about all the beings he had claimed over the eons. Most had begged for more time, more chances, more life. But Tejo seemed genuinely unconcerned about his own mortality. He cared more about how his life affected others than how long it lasted. If you do not fear death, Mortis said, what do you fear? Tejo thought about this for a long moment. I fear failing the people who trust me. I fear that my crew might lose hope. I fear that someday I might stop finding reasons to laugh. Stop believing that things can get better. Stop caring about others more than myself. You fear becoming selfish again, Necros observed. Yes, Tejo nodded. Because the moment I start thinking about my own survival first, I become mortal again in the way that matters. I become someone who can be easily killed because I have something to lose. And now? Thanatos asked. Tejo smiled, that warm, genuine smile again. Now I have already lost everything that mattered to the old me, and gained everything that matters to the new me. My crew's safety, their courage, their hope. Those things are worth dying for, which means they are also worth living for. The three Reapers sat in silence, processing everything they had learned. For the first time in their eternal existence, they understood why some mortals were so difficult to claim. It was not because they were stronger or smarter or luckier. than others. It was because they had learned to die before death came for them. And in doing so, they had discovered something that made them nearly immortal, the knowledge that some things are more important than surviving, and that choosing to serve those things transforms you into something death cannot easily touch. Kim Tae-ho had not cheated death 17 times through luck or skill alone. He had made himself into someone for whom death was no longer the worst possible outcome, and that transformation had given him a kind of power that even the Reapers were only beginning to understand. The silence in the observation lounge stretched for several minutes. Outside the window, the rescue ships continued pulling survivors from the escape pods scattered throughout the debris field. Captain Tae-ho watched them work, a satisfied smile on his face as he counted his crew members being brought safely aboard. 97% survival rate, he murmured to himself. Not perfect, but better than most people would expect from a 12-to-1 battle. The three Reapers exchanged glances. Even now, in the aftermath of his own ship's destruction, Tae-ho was thinking about his crew rather than himself. You lost people today, Mortis observed. 5 crew members, Tae-ho replied without turning around. Engineer Kim stayed behind to manually overload the reactor when the automatic systems failed. Gunner Lim held his position until the last second to make sure our final shots counted. The next song died trying to save a wounded teammate during the evacuation. Does their loss not anger you? Necros asked. Of course it does, Tae-ho said, his voice heavy with genuine grief. Every loss breaks my heart. Every name I have to add to the memorial wall feels like a personal failure. Then how can you still smile? Thanatos asked. Tae-ho turned to face them, and they could see tears in his eyes. But his smile remained warm and genuine, because they died as heroes. They chose to sacrifice themselves so others could live. Their deaths had meaning, purpose, value. That is not something to be angry about, it is something to be proud of. He wiped his eyes and continued. Engineer Kim knew exactly what would happen when he stayed behind. But he also knew that without him, the reactor would not overload properly, and the enemy would survive to chase down our escape pods. So he made a choice. The choice to die, Mortis said, the choice to matter. Tae-ho corrected. Kim could have run with everyone else and lived a few more minutes before we were all captured and killed. Instead, he chose to make his life count for something important. He saved 200 people with his sacrifice. And that makes his death acceptable to you? Necros asked. It makes his death meaningful, Tae-ho replied. Which is all any of us can ask for. We are all going to die someday. The only question is whether our deaths will help others or just add to the universe's collection of meaningless endings. Thanatos found herself thinking about all the deaths she had witnessed over the eons. Most were exactly what Tae-ho described, meaningless endings to lives that had accomplished nothing important. But some, she realized, had been different. Some mortals had died protecting others, fighting for causes they believed in, sacrificing themselves for the greater good. Had never understood the difference before. Now she was beginning to see that death itself was not the enemy. Meaningless death was the enemy. Death without purpose, without choice, without the chance to make a difference. We came here to learn how you escape us so often, Mortis said, slowly, but now I think we understand. You do not escape death. You transform it. Into what? Tae-ho asked curiously. Into a tool, Thanatos replied. You use the threat of death to motivate yourself and others to live better, fight harder, care more deeply. You turn mortality into a source of strength rather than weakness. Tae-ho nodded approvingly. Very good. Death gives life meaning. If we lived forever, nothing would matter because we could always do it later. But knowing our time is limited makes every moment precious, every choice important, every relationship valuable. And the laughter, Necros asked. How does humor fit into this philosophy? Laughter is what keeps the weight of mortality from crushing us, Tae-ho explained. When you truly understand how brief and fragile life is, you have two choices. You can be overwhelmed by the tragedy of it all, or you can be amazed by the comedy of it all. He gestured toward the debris field. Look at what we just did. A handful of humans in a patched-up ship defeated a fleet that should have been unstoppable. We did it through teamwork, creativity, and sheer stubbornness. If that is not worth laughing about, what is? The three Reapers considered this. For millions of years, they had viewed death as the ultimate victory, the final proof that all mortal struggles were futile. But Tae-ho had shown them something different. He had proven that the struggle itself could be more important than the outcome. What happens now? Thanatos asked. We came here to claim you, but we have learned something more valuable than another. Soul for our collection. What have you learned? Tae-ho asked. That there are worse things than dying. Mortis replied. Living without purpose, existing without hope, surviving without helping others. Those are the real defeats. And that some deaths are victories. Necros added. When someone chooses to die so others can live, death becomes a tool of creation, rather than destruction, and that laughter is not mockery of death, but celebration of life, Thanatos concluded. It is proof that consciousness can find joy even in the darkest circumstances. Tae-ho applauded softly. Excellent. You have learned in a few weeks what it took humanity thousands of years to figure out. I am impressed. So what do we do with this knowledge? Mortis asked. That depends, Tahoe replied. What do you want to do with it? The three Reapers looked at each other. For the first time in their eternal existence, they were uncertain about their purpose. They had always been collectors of endings, harvesters of final moments. But Tahoe had shown them that some endings were actually beginnings in disguise. We want to learn more, Thanatos said finally. We want to understand what makes some mortals like you so different from others. We want to see if other species have similar qualities, Necros added. If humans are unique, or if this capacity for meaningful sacrifice exists elsewhere. And we want to make sure that when deaths do occur, they matter. Mortis concluded. That beings do not die randomly or wastefully, but in ways that serve some greater purpose. Tahoe smiled broadly. Then I have a proposal for you. We are listening, Mortis said. A covenant between us? You stop trying to claim me specifically. Not because you cannot, but because you have found something more valuable than my death. In exchange, I will teach you more about human nature, about how we find hope in hopeless situations, about how we turn fear into courage and despair into determination. And in return, Thanatos asked, you help ensure that deaths in our battles have meaning. When my crew members die, they die as heroes, saving others. When civilians are killed, their deaths are mourned and remembered. When enemies fall, they are given the dignity of honorable opponents rather than just being forgotten. You want us to become curators of meaningful death? Necros asked. I want you to become teachers of meaningful life. Tahoe corrected. Help mortals understand that how they live matters more than how long they live. Show them that courage in the face of death is one of the most beautiful things in the universe. The three Reapers considered this proposal. It was unlike anything they had ever done before. Instead of simply collecting souls, they would be helping to shape how those souls chose to live and die. There is one condition, Mortis said finally. If we agree to this covenant, you must teach us something we have never experienced. What is that? How to laugh, Thanatos said. Real laughter, not the hollow sound of mockery or cruelty. The kind of laughter you use to fight despair and inspire hope. Tahoe grinned. That might be the hardest thing I have ever been asked to teach, but I accept the challenge. He stood up and extended his hand. Do we have an agreement? Mortis looked at the offered hand for a long moment, then reached out and shook it. As their hands touched, something changed in the fabric of reality itself. The ancient rules that govern the relationship between life and death shifted slightly, making room for something new. We have a covenant, Mortis said formally. Death will no longer seek Kim Tahoe for collection, but will instead seek to understand what makes life worth living so fiercely that death becomes an afterthought. As if to seal the agreement, Thanatos attempted a laugh. It was awkward and forced, like the sound of wind through broken glass, but it was genuine the first time in her eternal existence that she had tried to create joy instead of ending it. Tahoe laughed in response, warm and encouraging. That is a good start. We will work on it. Just then, the rescue ship's communication system activated. Captain Tahoe, this is Lieutenant Commander Shin Yuri. All crew members have been recovered. We are ready to return to Kepler Station. Thank you, Commander Tahoe replied. Set course for home. We have a new ship to requisition and new adventures to plan. As the rescue ship turned toward the distant station, Tahoe looked out at the stars with satisfaction. His crew was safe. His mission was accomplished, and he had somehow managed to turn death itself into an ally rather than an enemy. You know, he said to the three Reapers, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. What will you tell your crew? About us, Necros asked. The truth, Tahoe replied, that I had a conversation with death, and death decided it wanted to learn how to live instead of just how to end things. They will probably find it amusing, and if they do not believe you, Thanatos asked. Tahoe shrugged cheerfully. Then, I will tell them it was all a dream, brought on by oxygen deprivation in the escape pod. Either way, they will get a good story out of it.